Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham Yahushai, Bahasham, Rucha Kodesh. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone, and peace and blessings to the elect. And today we're going to go into the book of Jeremiah, the 48th chapter. And this is a prophecy concerning the judgment that the Lord had destined for the Moabites. So this is Jeremiah chapter 48, verse 1. It says, "Against Moab, thus saith the Lord Yahweh of hosts, the God of Israel, woe unto Nebo, for it is spoiled." Nebo was a location within Moab, one of their cities. Kiriathaim is confounded and taken. Misgab is confounded and dismayed. And what it means by confounded, meaning that it's been taken, right? It has succumbed, okay, onto the judgment of the Lord. and based on how the Lord is wording it, it's like a mix of, invasion, right? Being taken captive, being taken over by a foreign adversary, and also at the same time having to deal with, certain disasters, be it droughts or fires, and so on. Verse 2, "There shall be no more praise for Moab. In Heshbon they have devised evil against it. Come, and let us cut it off from being a nation. Also thou shalt be cut down, O madman, and the sword shall pursue thee." Okay, so as it says, there shall be no more praise in Moab. So, the sound, all right, of rejoicing and all of that is gonna be cut off, because they're gonna basically be brought down, right? And then a nation in a destroyed state like that has no room for praise. All right, as it says, in Heshbon they have devised evil against it. Heshbon, I believe, is also another region within that territory. And said, "Come and let us cut it off from being a nation," right? Which is to say, let us completely consume them. Also thou shalt be cut down, O madman. Now, madman, when you look at it in the Hebrew, it's not it's not madman as in how you would look at it in English, like crazy people. It's actually talking about a location of Moab. So when we go into that word, right, Madaman, and as it says here, dunghill, or a place in Moab threatened with destruction in the denunciations of Jeremiah. All right, so it's not in the sense of people who are crazed, but rather a location where people were dwelling. And as it says, the sword shall pursue thee, so that destruction is going to come even upon you too. A voice of crying shall be from Horonaim, spoiling and great destruction. Which, such is the case when there's destruction. There's always screaming, there's always wailing, there's always crying and distress. Moab is destroyed. Her little ones have caused a cry to be heard, right? So there's crying from their children, their women, their men. For in the going up of Luhith, continual weeping shall go up, right? Once again, there's going to be crying everywhere. For in the going down of Horonaim, the enemies have heard a cry of destruction. And what does this sound like? It sounds like the screams, right? As you're hearing, the screams, you're smelling the smoke, you're hearing the fire burning through. These are the cries of destruction. Flee, save your lives, be like the heath in the wilderness, right? So this, now, as Jeremiah is saying this, it's like, imagine seeing, it's almost like describing the visual, right, of this judgment the Lord has commanded against them, right? And he's seeing this, and he's like seeing people, scrambling, right, to try and escape, to try and run away, and so on and so forth, with different troops of soldiers in there, slaying people, and the typical scene that comes to mind. For because thou hast trusted in thy works and in thy treasures, thou shalt also be taken, right? Because they became proud, right, and thinking that they wouldn't be touched. And Chemosh shall go forth into captivity with his priests. Chemosh was one of their gods, their deities, with his priests and his princes together. And the spoiler shall come upon every city, and no city shall escape. And the spoiler is also often used to represent the whatever nation it is that the Lord is using to dish out this judgment. They're likened unto a spoiler because they are making you a spoil, right? And as it says, and no city shall escape. So they're not, the Moabites wouldn't escape, the hand of this judgment. The valley also shall perish, meaning those that are dwelling in the lower regions, the plains, and the plain shall be destroyed, as the Lord Yahweh hath spoken. Now, one thing to mention, when it talks about destroyed, it doesn't mean like that land is just gonna not exist anymore. But compared to how it was, when there was peace and people were living their day to day, versus the aftermath, right, of buildings being broken down, being set on fire, dead bodies, just a complete 180 of what it used to be like. That site compared to what it was like before would be a destroyed version of that place, right? Give wings unto Moab, that it may flee and get away. And not literal, but in the sense of, if only, right? If only, Moab could grow wings so that they could escape this destruction, because man, it's so bad. For the cities thereof shall be desolate, without any to dwell therein. Cursed be he that doeth the work of the Lord Yahweh deceitfully, and cursed be he that keepeth back his sword from blood. Now, in this precept here, Jeremiah 48:10, like we often use that as well, in reference to the work that we do, but in a general sense, anybody that the Lord sets up, right, or appoints to do a certain thing. But for example, even if it's a nation that the Lord sets up to go and take over another, or whatever the case is, as it says, cursed be he that doeth the work of the Lord deceitfully. So not doing it to the fullness of it, right, or keeping back your sword from blood, meaning not wholly or completely accomplishing what the Lord has commanded you to do. Cursed be you, as in the Lord would, he would judge you for that. And so obviously in the way that applies to us now is that the work of the Lord that we have been appointed to do, right, is in this ministry, is to teach this word. And so those that are doing it without sincerity of heart, okay, to the fullness, the Lord is going to have he's going to have a dealing with you, okay, and it's not going to be good. So as it says, cursed be he that doeth the work of the Lord deceitfully, and cursed be he that keepeth back his sword from blood. When you keep back your sword from blood, you're like hesitant. You're not going all the way with it. But when it comes to the work of the Lord, or what the Lord has commanded you to do, you don't have the option, to hold back. Verse 11, Moab hath been. Now I just want to explain that a bit, because, if you're reading it in the sense of the whole chapter, it might seem, you might wonder how it seems a bit out of place in the chapter, but, in actuality, it's not. Verse 11, Moab hath been at ease from his youth, and he hath settled on his lease. Now here, the language is used in comparing Moab and the Moabites in their land to like wine, right? The process of like wine making, where it says here, he hath been at ease from his youth, meaning that they've become complacent and therefore proud for a very long time, because they weren't, unlike Israel, which constantly met extreme atrocities. Places like Moab, yes, they did have, they were made subject. If a foreign power dominated the region, yeah, they would be under them as well, but not suffering as much calamities as, say, maybe that of some of the other neighboring nations. So as it says, they have been at ease from his youth, and he hath settled on his lease. Now, settling on your lease is like, when they make wine during the process of fermentation, you have the lease, which is like the dead yeast cells and, those kinds of things that settle down to the bottom of the bottle, right, or the vessel. And the wine settling upon it, meaning the wine that is at the top, right, above the lees that is on the bottom of the vessel. Now I looked up here why it is, because in the process of winemaking, they don't leave the wine to be settled on the lees for just like that. They eventually pour it from one vessel to another, and the process of doing that refines the wine, right? So I looked up here, why is wine poured from one vessel to another and not allowed to settle on the lees for too long? It says wine is poured from one vessel to another to separate it from the lees, i.e. dead yeast and sediment, a process called racking, which refines and clarifies the wine. Letting wine sit on the lees for too long can cause it to spoil, developing off flavors and aromas from the decomposing dregs. The process of pouring or racking removes the solid lees, which helps to clear the wine and leave behind sediment and dead yeast cells. While a short period of contact with lees can add desirable flavors like biscuit or toast through a process called yeast autolysis, prolonged contact can lead to undesirable characteristics. If left too long on the lees, the wine can begin to rot, taking on a foul, dreggy taste and smell. Repeated racking, right, constantly pouring from one vessel to another, results in a more pure and refined wine with a fresher scent and better color, which is pleasing to the winemaker. Now it says the process. After fermentation, yeast and other particles settle at the bottom of the container. The winemaker carefully pours the liquid into a new, clean vessel, leaving the settled lees behind in the original container. This process is repeated as many times as needed to achieve the desired clarity and purity in the wine. So here, the Lord likens Moab onto wine that is settled on the lees and has not been emptied from vessel to vessel. So we read what happens, right, if it just stays there too long, right, and eventually has this like strong and undesirable, taste, being eventually mixed, right, developing the flavors of the mixture of the decomposing dregs. And the Lord is likening Moab onto that. Neither hath he gone into captivity. So the comparison here is the people of Moab are like the wine in the land, right, in that same vessel. All right. And being that they haven't been removed from that land, they've settled there and become complacent and proud. Okay. As it says here, therefore his taste remained in him and his scent is not changed. See, like wine that isn't poured from one vessel to another. So it just gets, mixed with the flavors of the dregs on the bottom, and it just has that strong sort of taste to it that may not always be desirable. And here, that is the undesirable traits that Moab started to develop, being complacent in their land for so long. And what would happen is they would witness, say, the destruction of like Jerusalem, for example, and they would be proud and rejoice at that. And because they might not have suffered the same fate, they'd just be more comfortable and complacent, dwelling in their region. But the Lord said they wouldn't go unpunished. Verse 12, therefore, behold, the days come, saith the Lord Yahweh, that I will send unto him wanderers, and they shall cause him to wander, and shall empty his vessels, and break their bottles. Now I'll read this in another translation for clarity. All right, NLT fine, and NIV is also fine, but it says here, but the time is coming soon, says the Lord, when I will send men to pour him from his jar. These are the wanderers. They will pour him out, then shatter the jar, right? Which represents that they would remove them, okay, and take them captive from their land and break their bottles, which would be like the land holding them. And Moab shall be ashamed of Chemosh, as the house of Israel was ashamed of Bethel, their confidence, and Chemosh being one of their deities. And the Lord is likening that onto how the northern kingdom, they had confidence or trust in the golden calf or idol that was set up by Jeroboam at Bethel. So just like that didn't deliver them, And at the point of their destruction, they were ashamed in having trusted in that because it didn't deliver them from the judgment to come. Same would be the case with Moab. How say ye, we are mighty and strong men for the war? Right? So how weren't you the same people, who boasted in that, in your might, in having mighty men? And yet Moab is spoiled. Right? So as it says here, and yet Moab is spoiled and gone up out of her cities, meaning they've been taken captive, and his chosen young men are gone down to the slaughter. They've been slain, they've been put to death, saith the king whose name is the Lord of hosts, the Most High. The calamity of Moab is near to come, meaning that judgment is upon them, and his affliction hasteth fast, so it won't be long before it happens to them. All ye that are about him bemoan him. So all you that are, that are around, all these regions, countries, cities that are around, mourn for him. And all ye that know his name, say, how is the strong staff broken and the beautiful rod? Right? So here Moab is likened onto like a scepter or a staff, which has dwelt, okay for a period of time. And how is it that now they've been destroyed so badly? How did this come about? And this is a saying used when people, like, how they say, like, I didn't see that coming. Yeah, that kind of thing. Verse 18, thou daughter that dost inhabit Dibon, come down from thy glory and sit in thirst. And when you're sitting in thirst, meaning you're lacking or you're wanting, right? So coming down from your glory, meaning in a position of complacency, right? Or having or want or not wanting for things, to now being at a loss. For the spoiler of Moab shall come upon thee, and he shall destroy thy strongholds. And when you look up the region of Dibon, it says here, wasting, a town in Moab on the east side of the Jordan, which was taken over by the Israelites and rebuilt by the children of Gad. A place in South Judah, re-inhabited by men of Judah after the return from captivity. So, as it says here, it was rebuilt by the children of Gad, but as we know, they were taken captive along with the northern kingdom. So, who do you think would be dwelling in that region? So, as the time when the judgment would come, it's saying here that even you, which are, even if you're not in the capital of Moab, all the cities of Moab would be, this judgment will come upon them, right? You wouldn't escape just because you were a further away city, right, from I don't want to say epicenter, but like from the capital or the first place of attack, you could say. So as it says here, for the spoiler of Moab shall come upon thee, and he shall destroy thy strongholds. And strongholds, because most cities had certain, or most regions had certain particular cities that were known as, that were built for cases like this. If there was an invasion or there was a war, the women, the children, people would flee to those areas because they were built and designed to be able to withstand sieges, or be able to protect from outside invaders. But as it says here, they would be destroyed. O inhabitant of Aurora, stand by the way and espy. So stand and watch closely. Ask him that fleeth, and her that escapeth, and say what is done. Right. So like a neighboring city that sees what's going on in another city being destroyed, and then ask those that barely make it out, like, what's going on? What's happening? Moab is confounded, for it is broken down. Howl and cry, tell ye it in Arnon, that Moab is spoiled. So spread the word that Moab is they're cooked. And judgment is come upon the plain country, upon Holon, and upon Jahaza, and upon Mephaath, and upon Dibon, and upon Nebo, and upon Beth Diblathaim, and upon Kiriathaim, and upon Beth Gamul, and upon Beth Maon, and upon Kirioth, and upon Bozrah, and upon all the cities of the land of Moab, far or near. And when you look up Bozrah over here, they have it as a town in Edom and a town in Moab, right? So it seems apparently they had a region in Moab that was called that. But long story short, this is showing the territories of Moab being succumbing to this judgment and not escaping, whether they be far or near. Like I mentioned earlier, the horn of Moab is cut off. The horn also representing their power, right? It's cut off. They have now been weakened. His arm is broken, saith the Lord Yahweh, right? So their trust or their defense has been broken. Make him drunken, for he magnifieth himself or magnified himself against the Lord. Drunken here, obviously, you're not going to have enemies come into your land and then sit you down and start pouring wine down your throat. So it's not saying literally sit down and pour wine in their mouth to make them drunk, but it's likening the, basically the feeling, all right, to like one that is drunk. Okay, so they're going to be like one that is drunk, because when you're drunk, you're really at a disadvantage. You're not able to, if something goes down, you can't function fully, right? Because your reflexes are delayed, right? You're inebriated. Your sense of judgment is off. Okay, your sense of balance is also off. So that puts you in like a vulnerable state, right? And that's what the Lord likens how Moab is going to be, like one that is drunken, for he magnified himself against the Lord, right? So they basically boasted against the Lord. And as we're going to read on down, the Lord makes a reference to their behavior at the calamity of Israel. All right. And in doing so, whether they realize it or not, they boast against the Lord, because when they make, they make Israel a reproach. In doing so, you're also making it seem as though their God is, is not as great as he was made out to seem, if this is what's happening to his people. So as it says here, Moab also shall wallow in his vomit. Right. So, when you get so drunk and you throw up, wallowing is like, is like rolling in it. And he also shall be in derision. Right. So all this is to say that they're not going to be in a good case. Right. They're going to be helpless and destroyed, but likened onto one that is overwhelmed with strong drink, so much so that they throw up, and then they're out here basically slipping and falling in it. Here we go. For was not Israel a derision unto thee? See, so what weren't you part of those that ridiculed Israel when they were going through the judgment that I was bringing upon them? Was he found amongst thieves? For since thou speakest of him, thou skippest for joy. So what were they like? Was it like catching thieves, right, in the act of thievery, where at least you would be justified in speaking ill of them, right, because of what they were doing, right? But the Lord is saying, was that the case? Is that how you found Israel, to where when you spoke concerning them in terms of their affliction they were going through, you skipped with joy? You were so happy to see the calamity come upon my people. So now it's coming upon you, and let's see if you skip for joy then. O ye that dwell in Moab, leave the cities and dwell in the rocks. So flee from the cities and go and hide in the caves and the rocks for safety. And be like the dove that maketh her nest in the sides of the hole's mouth, which are the caves. We have heard the pride of Moab. He is exceeding proud. Yeah, until this day, they still have that pride. His loftiness, another way of, a word somewhat synonymous with pride, and his arrogancy and his pride and the haughtiness of his heart. So the Lord is like, don't think that you're this saint, right? I've seen your arrogancy. I've seen your pride. I know his wrath, saith the Lord Yahweh, but it shall not be so. Now, when you go into this word wrath, one of the definitions there is arrogance. Okay. It says outpouring, overflow, excess, fury, wrath, arrogance. See, so the Lord is saying here, I know, I've heard, right? I know about their arrogance, saith the Lord, but it shall not be so. His lies shall not so effective, meaning that their pride and arrogance is going to amount to nothing. Therefore will I howl for Moab, and I will cry out for all Moab. Mine heart shall mourn for the men of Kiharis. Now, it's not that Jeremiah actually cares so much that he's crying for Moab, but this is emphasizing how bad of a calamity is going to come upon them, that he is like, it's so bad, like I could cry, or I could mourn for them because of how bad it is that they're going to have it. O vine of Sibma, I will weep for thee with the weeping of Jazer. Thy plants are gone over the sea, they reach even to the sea of Jazer. The spoiler is fallen upon thy summer fruits and upon thy vintage. And I'll read this in the NLT as well. You people of Sibma, rich in vineyards, I will weep for you even more than I did for Jazer. Your spreading vines once reached as far as the Dead Sea, but the destroyer has stripped you bare, both of your people and of your goodies, your resources. He has harvested your grapes and summer fruits. From the cry, actually, verse 33. And joy and gladness is taken from the plentiful field and from the land of Moab, right? So there's no more, sense of normalcy, right? No more joy. You're not hearing people rejoicing and laughing and all of that. I mean, how could they? And I have caused wine to fail from the wine presses. None shall tread with shouting. So you're all the different vineyards that you have and all that, it's all going to be taken away. And as it says, none shall tread with shouting. Now, the treading here is, when they gathered the grapes and they put it in the wine press, they would stomp on it, right? And there would be a rejoicing, right, where they would sing and so on and so forth. So here it says, none shall tread with shouting, right, which is to signify that you're not going to be having joy anymore. Their shouting shall be no shouting. So there will be noise, but it's not going to be that of rejoicing like those treading in the wine press. For the cry of Heshbon, from the cry of Heshbon, even unto Elilah, and even unto Jahaz, have they uttered their voice. From Zoar, even unto Horonaim, as an heifer of 3 years old, meaning that the sound of the screams and the calamity is heard in the regions all about, like the sound of a crying young female cow. For the waters also of Nimrim shall be desolate, meaning the different waters are going to be dried up. That's why I mentioned you're going to have, calamities from foreign invaders, but also from different natural disasters that the Lord would also hit them with. Because remember, he's pronouncing a judgment against this nation. Verse 35, moreover, I will cause to cease in Moab, saith the Lord Yahweh, him that offereth in the high places, so those that were worshiping their idols over there, and him that burneth incense to his gods. So they're also going to be cooked. Therefore mine heart shall sound for Moab like pipes, and mine heart shall sound like pipes for the men of Kirhares, because the riches that he hath gotten are perished. So their wealth is gone. All right, it's been taken. They're basically left with nothing. Like this is almost like I would pity them. For every head shall be bald, and every beard clipped. Upon all the hands shall be cuttings, and upon the loins sackcloth. And this represents mourning, meaning they're all going to be in a state of mourning. There shall be lamentation generally upon all the housetops of Moab, and in the streets thereof. For I have broken Moab like a vessel, wherein is no pleasure, saith the Lord. So if you were to take a look at what would be going on in Moab during this time, all you'd see left and right is just people mourning, destroyed, afraid. And the Lord likens how and why he's going to do this to Moab, like a jar that he doesn't care about anymore, right? He's broken it, just slams it on the ground, into all these many pieces, and he's not concerned about it. Your favorite mug falls down and breaks, you'd be real upset, but if this like already chipped, dirty, disgusting, glass from like the shack somewhere falls down, and breaks, then it's just like, yeah, just clean it up, and get it out of there. I don't even know why I was there to begin with. Verse 39, they shall howl, saying, how is it broken? How hath Moab turned the back with shame? right? How is it that this Moab, which at one point was a great, it was, they were great in their own sense, okay? And now look at them now, right? Which were covered with shame. So shall Moab be a derision and a dismaying to all them about him. So Moab is now going to be an object of ridicule, used as, a description of ruin. Like, damn, like, look at what happened over there to Moab. For thus saith the Lord Yahweh, behold, he shall fly as an eagle and shall spread his wings over Moab. This is talking about those the Lord would send against them. Kirioth, meaning that's how they're going to descend upon the land. Kirioth is taken, and the strongholds are surprised, and the mighty men's hearts in Moab at that day shall be as the heart of a woman in her pangs, meaning a woman in labor. They're going to be basically afraid and in anguish and distress like a woman in labor. And these are supposed to be the warriors. And Moab shall be destroyed from being a people because he hath magnified himself against the Lord. So that would be the judgment the Lord is going to bring upon him. Fear and the pit and the snare shall be upon thee, O inhabitant of Moab, saith the Lord. Right? And the pit is also a trap, and so is a snare, but they're different kinds of traps. He that fleeth from the fear shall fall into the pit, and he that getteth up out of the pit shall be taken in the snare. So there's going to be no escape, right? You're going to meet terror on one side, you run away, you fall into, the hands of another. And for I will bring upon it, even upon Moab, the year of their visitation, which is another way of saying the time of the Lord's judgment, saith the Lord Yahweh. The they that fled stood under the shadow of Heshbon because of the force. So you had some that fled from one city and they try to flee to Heshbon, as in a place that they thought would be a stronghold for them because of their defense. But as it says, but a fire shall come forth out of Heshbon, and a flame from the midst of Sihon, and shall devour the corner of Moab, and the crown of the head of the tumultuous ones, right? Tumultuous ones is still referring to Moab, but it's saying here, the place that they would flee to for defense, even from there shall destruction come like a fire, and burn and devour, and they're not going to escape, all right? Basically from head to toe. Woe be unto thee, O Moab, the people of Chemosh perisheth, right? Chemosh being their god. For thy sons are taken captives, and thy daughters captives. Yet will I bring again the captivity of Moab in the latter days, saith the Lord Yahweh. Thus far is the judgment of Moab. So the Lord is saying, yeah, destruction onto you. Your people are taken away captives, but at some point, I'm gonna have mercy and return and get them out of that captivity, as it says in the latter days, saith the Lord. And this is the judgment concerning Moab. And this isn't, exceptional to just Moab, right? Because even in other precepts, the Lord mentioned that concerning even these heathens, that he would bring this judgment upon them, but it wasn't an everlasting judgment, right? That it would be for a period of time, and then he would lift that judgment off of them. And with that, that's the end of Jeremiah, the 48th chapter. Lord willing, this is edifying to the elect. Closing, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Recha, Kodash. And until next time, Shalom.